Hello everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Brittany and I want to welcome you all to the Project Management using Microsoft Project and Sharepoint webinar. First, we'll talk about a couple optimization tools, then I'll introduce our speaker Eric Verju from the Versatile Company, and he'll take over and give his presentation. We will then have Gary Ballantyne talk about Quick Start and show some of our project management classes that we offer, and we'll also have Q&A for any questions you might have for Eric or Gary. We will have a closing survey that will be emailed to you by Tuesday. Once you fill out that survey, you'll receive the recording of this webinar. Like I said, this webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you after you take the survey. To optimize your experience during the webinar, feel free to ask questions by clicking on the message icon and typing in the box at the bottom left. If Eric sees that your question is one he can answer without going too off topic, he'll answer the question as he's presenting. Otherwise, Eric will answer questions at the end during Q&A. If you don't want to see the chat section, go ahead and click the X at the top of the message box. You can view the screen and presentation in full screen by clicking on the icon at the bottom right. And I'll now hand it over to Eric Verju, who's president of the Versatile Company, and he'll give his presentation on project management using Microsoft Project and SharePoint. Eric?
Hi, and Brittany, thank you for that introduction. Folks, thanks for joining us today. I'm looking forward to sharing principles of project management and some guidance on how to use Microsoft Project and SharePoint to make the most of your projects. What we're going to find out today is that project management is first and foremost discipline. It's first and foremost has practices that everybody can apply to make their projects more successful. And we'll also find out that if you use proven project management technologies such as Microsoft Project and SharePoint, it'll be a lot easier for you to apply basic project management techniques. I want to tell you just a few things about who I am before we get going today. Versatile Company, we've been a partner with Quick Start for nearly 10 years, and we're proud of that partnership. We teach a lot of classes in project management, Microsoft Project, which Gary will tell you about later. At Versatile, we focus on improving our clients' project results, whether it be through training, through consulting, or technology such as Microsoft Project and SharePoint. I'm happy to be here today. Just to give you a little background on myself, I founded this company in 1990, and since that time we've worked with thousands and thousands of project managers. We've worked with organizations literally around the world in every industry that you can think of, whether it be putting in a natural gas pipeline in the energy industry, or in public schools, and in healthcare reform, software companies, IT, retail, you name it. We've done work in those industries. And probably Versatile is best known for the two books you see on the screen right now that I've written, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management and the Portable MBA in Project Management. I'm happy to tell you that if you are looking for the best, most popular book in project management, you'll see it right there with the Fast Forward MBA. It's used by more colleges and universities and practicing professionals around the world than any other. So with that brief introduction, let's go ahead and set the agenda and be focused on what we're going to do today. So my goal here is to make this a fun, interactive, valuable hour of your day. And in fact, the interactive piece is going to be critical to making it valuable. So throughout this webinar, I'm going to be asking you to participate. And there's going to be a time for you to send in some comments to me via that chat box that Brittany pointed out. And I hope that you've got a pencil and paper ready, because there's a very interactive element to this. We're going to begin with a vision of success. In other words, we want to understand what successful projects look like. And we're going to apply it to your project right now, today. That's why you need a pencil and paper ready, because this is going to be interactive. It's what the same principles that we use in every class that we teach, and that is the powerful learning results from engaged learners, and that's got to be you today. So commit to yourself and commit to this webinar that you're going to be engaged and active, and that's why you'll get more out of it. We're going to address 5 project success factors, and I'm going to tell you the biggest threat to on time, on budget, high quality projects. And then we're going to tie it all back to these technologies that we've been discussing, Microsoft Project and SharePoint. So let's get ready, and let's start by identifying kind of one of the biggest obstacles that we have in the project management industry to really consistent, effective project management, and that is the fear of jargon. Okay, so today one of the goals is to eliminate jargon as much as possible throughout the presentation. I want this to make practical sense to you about how to manage your projects more effectively. You've got to understand the 5 project success factors that apply to all projects, and then we can tie them back to SharePoint and Microsoft Project. All the while, I'm going to do my best to make it common sense, practical information, and while you'll see some jargon, we're going to make sure that you know how to manage a project without being a PMP, a project management professional. Okay, let's get going then. We'll start by defining our terms. So you might as well understand exactly what we're talking about here. We need to define project. And so this is a practical, classic definition of what do we mean by a project. So if you are working on something that changes, if you're making improvements, if you're customizing something, chances are that you're working on a project. And as another way of thinking about this, I'm going to show you a continuum. And I want you to imagine where your work lies on this continuum. Is it on the left? Is it operational? Is it repetitive? Things like, imagine, for example, a school, a hospital, a bank. There's so much repetitive work in all of those things where we do similar things every day. Or if you're manufacturing, those tend to be repetitive activities. Projects, on the other hand, tend to be unique. And so the reason that we're using this continuum is that all of our work falls somewhere to the left or right here. Something like payroll is on the way left. It's things that we do on a regular basis. We know how to do it, and we've optimized it because it's repetitive. Projects might be a marketing campaign. It could be a reorg. It could be launching a new product. But the fact is there's something that's unique about it. Even if it's you've done product launches before, because every product launch is unique and is new, that means there's going to be something unique and new about the work associated with this. So I want you to think of this as your first practical project management tip today, and that is to make sure that when you are working on a project, you actually know that it has a specific finish point, because if it doesn't have a specific finish point when you are done with that project, then in fact you may be working on something that's more of an operation. And I can tell you that's frustrating to try to apply project management techniques to operations because operations don't end. They just keep going. All right. Now, we're going to start with the interactive piece of this. For our first interactive exercise, we're going to visualize success. And this is where you need your pencil and paper. I want you to write down the name of a successful project that you have personally experienced. Could be where you're working right now. It could be something you've worked on before. It doesn't need to be on the job, but I think on the job is going to be more practically useful for you today. But you probably had a project that was on time, on budget, with a great result. But more importantly, it was a project that you loved and you would do it again. As far as you're concerned, all projects should be this good. So once you've written down the name of that project, now I want you to write down something else. I want you to write down what made that project work so well. I want you to think about what was happening on that project. What was going on a day-to-day basis that made it so successful? And now I want you to write down at least 3 success factors. Okay? Now again, if you are actively involved in this, you're going to find that we can apply these success factors to your projects today, and you're going to walk out of this webinar having not only learned something, but actually with a tool set to start improving your projects right now. So do this, take action, and write down at least 3 success factors for that project, that best project. And now I'm going to challenge you to share one with us. Go ahead and use that that question chat feature that Brittany explained to you before. Use that chat feature. Tell me at least one success factor that you've experienced on your projects in the past. And I think everybody can see this as they roll in. We'll all see them, but I'll read them off just in case. And okay, so I've got the first one, an engaged project team. I like it. I appreciate you sending that in. Okay, open communication, clear goals. Thank you. No surprises. All right. Engaging stakeholders early and often. Good requirements. That makes sense, right? So keep it up. You're doing great here. Dedicated staff to the project. Oh, good. Thank you for sending these in. Keep sending them in. This is pretty interesting. I think that's part of the benefit of using a tool like Lync. We're actually demonstrating how to make projects successful using technology right now as we act. Proper, thorough documentation, and appreciate you sending that in, Ruth. So, and here's another one, clear objectives. So I appreciate you sending those in today. What you're going to see is that I have asked this question probably 1,000 times to people just like you over the years. I've asked this question over and over to all of our customers because every time we run a class, we start out with this exercise. And so over time, you can imagine we've seen some patterns emerge. And what I'm going to share with you right now are the top 5 success factors that we've seen over and over. Number 1, and you've already got this written down, agreement among the project team, customers, and management on the goals of the project. Number 2, a plan that shows an overall path. It's clear responsibilities that can be used to measure progress. In fact, I think you're going to find that engaging the whole team and getting real commitment from the team is going to be a function of how well the plan shows clear responsibilities. We'll talk about some other ways today to address your other success factors. Number 3 on my list, effective communication among everyone involved in the project. Number 4 is a controlled scope, which is very related to good requirements. And number 5, management support. So thank you for giving me those success factors that you've experienced. I'm going to guess that some of these success factors that I've listed on the screen resonate pretty well with you in those successful projects you were on. So today in this webinar, we're going to tie each one of these project success factors. I'm going to describe a little bit. At the end of the webinar, I'm actually going to give you an opportunity to get a checklist that goes right along with these 5 project success factors so you can test your own project against this. And we're going to tie these to Microsoft Project and SharePoint, see how those technology help us meet these success factors. All the while, I'm going to try to do my best to keep it all practical. And in fact, what you see so far here is that we've been able to talk about project success and the top 5 factors that apply to every project without using almost any jargon at all. Now, here's a little tip for you. This is your first step to launch a new project. That was a pretty simple exercise, wasn't it? But what if the next time you do a project kickoff meeting, you do that very same exercise? Ask people sitting around to think about their best projects, what made them go so well, make a list, encourage them to be specific as possible, and then use that list throughout the project. Call it back to them, because people said, if you say, well, we had engaged project team, we had open communication, we had clear goals, we had no surprises, we had good requirements, hey, put that on your list, and every week when you meet with your project team, call at least for the first couple of times, call them back to that list and say, how are we doing against what you've already told me are the project success factors? So there's a tip for you today. You can take that back to your next project kickoff team meeting. Okay? And this list, because if you do this for your projects, will reflect your organization and reinforce best practices throughout the project. Now, let's go ahead and put this to work throughout this webinar. You've already done some work. You've written down a successful project, but I want you to help me out, help yourself out. Write down the name of a current project. Okay? You don't have to be managing it, just working on it. I really want to encourage you to follow along on this project you own, okay? As I said before, what we know about learning a new topic is that if you can understand it in the context of your situation, you'll grasp the concepts much more easily. We do this in our classes all the time. So write down the name of a current project, and as we go through it, you'll be evaluating that project against these 5 project success factors. Okay, let's go to work. Number 1, agreement among the project team, customers, and management on the goals of the project. So here's the first way to evaluate this, okay? And I want you to evaluate your project. How does it measure up against all these factors as we go? Can you name everyone that will judge the project's success? This applies to specific people and to groups of people. For every person that will judge the project, do you know what criteria they will use? Is it clearly written down? If not, can you write it down? Now, how about this? Do they all agree? Do they all want the same things? How about the team? Did they agree? Do you agree? Are all these expectations realistic? Don't be too easy on yourself as you grade this. In fact, this is probably one of the most important ones to be tough on yourself with, because if you don't have clear goals that everybody wants, there's really no way you'll make everybody happy. This success factor right here is the foundation of project success. Again, notice it was pretty straightforward, very little jargon. But here's the jargon alert. Okay, so that's the success factor. If you want to learn really how to do this stuff, if you wanted to learn the discipline of project management, what you would start to learn are terms like stakeholders, statement of work, triple constraint, and these are the kind of project management terms and techniques that help you gain clear expectations among all your stakeholders. All right, now let's go to success factor number 2. It's a plan that shows an overall path, clear responsibilities, and can be used to measure progress. So, test yourself. Do you have an action plan? And have you broken it down? Do you have a strong, detailed action plan? Because the foundation of a strong plan is you've taken the big project and you've broken it down into small pieces. Now, can you break it down a little further? Because the further you break it down, the better you're going to understand that project. Remember, every project is unique. So how are you going to manage unique work? You're going to decompose it into its individual pieces. And how might we do that? Well, here's a popular way that we envision a project. And you'll notice here that I've got a picture of a Post-it note, sticky notes. This is always a popular activity in the classes and planning workshops that we do. It really helps us to visualize the way a project breaks down. So I take that big project, I break it down into major chunks, then I start to break each one of those down into the smaller pieces, and I do this repetitively until I can visualize the whole entire project. Okay, now the next thing I do with that is I can show an overall path. Look at this. Can you show an overall path? Can you visualize how you're going to get from the start of the project all the way to the end? What needs to get done first? Which tasks come before others? Can you communicate this entire sequence of relationships to team members and customers? So that's the second test I would ask of your project plan. Can you show an overall path with clear sequence? All right, now, in addition, I want to have clear responsibilities. So I want to know that for each task on that list, I know who's responsible and what's the due date for it. And do you have that information? So again, this is a test for you. How are you measuring up against this success factor? And finally, the final question, you may have written their name on that Post-it note. You may have put a due date on it, but the final thing is that person committed to that date, and do they really understand that responsibility? Now, you'll notice that the other part of this is success factor is that we have a plan here that we can use to measure progress. So you can see here that this plan can be so important. It's pivotal to project success. It helps us see the big picture. It helps us see clear responsibilities, and it can be used to measure progress. Now, it's great to kick off a project using Post-it notes, but I can tell you big projects don't get managed using Post-it notes, folks. They get managed using software and specialized techniques. So if you're going to do the work that we just described, you're going to learn how to use terms and techniques like work breakdown structure and network diagram and Gantt chart and resource leveling. If you've ever heard of a critical path, you really need to understand these kinds of techniques, terminology, in order to build that plan. And of course, this is where Microsoft Project comes in. So I want you to realize that first step of a planning process does start with the Post-it notes, and it does start with visualization. But then eventually you want to put it into a tool that's easy to keep up to date. And that's why Project is so helpful, because it's designed to do exactly what we've described here to meet all of those criteria of a successful plan. Notice here you've got the big project breaking down into little chunks, just like we described. You've got people's names associated with each one. In fact, let's take this a little closer here. So Microsoft Project is incredibly powerful. It's designed to reinforce proven industry best practices. Now, the key to learning it quickly is to understand those fundamentals of project management that we've already been talking about. So let's take a look at what I mean. This is what people typically see when they look at a good project plan in Microsoft Project. There's a lot going on here, but we can actually take a step-by-step approach to putting all of this together. So remember that work breakdown structure we used, the Post-it notes? This is the list of tasks we talked about before. Okay, we've broken into chunks and smaller chunks, and you can see how that task list shows up here as the basis for the plan. It's a big task that breaks into smaller tasks, right? So it's the exact same thing we discussed before. Now let's keep going. We've emphasized how important it is to know which tasks happen first, second, etc. And some tasks must be done before others. Let's zoom into our project plan and notice that Project makes all these connections very visible. And you can see that there. Each of those tasks are connected to each other. Now, do you know specifically who is responsible for every action and when it will be done? Is each responsible person committed to these dates? Well, what do we have here? So with Project, it allows us to apply individual people's names here. Now you can see in my simple example, I've just put engineer, but I could have actually somebody's name on this task, and then we know specifically who's responsible. Can we use Microsoft Project to clearly show progress? You bet. Take a look at this, at these two sets of tasks. The ones on the right here above have a black line through the middle that represents completion. You can see that some tasks have the line 100% of the way through the task, meaning they are 100% complete. If the line isn't all the way through, then it's partially complete. These tasks below haven't started yet. Is that a problem? Well, the project manager can look at this chart and quickly see where the project team should be and where they actually are. You can see why Microsoft Project is so popular. It's designed from the ground up to apply proven project management techniques. But it does take some energy. And on smaller projects, it can seem like too much work. That's one reason SharePoint 2013 is a great project management tool. The Gantt view in SharePoint is easy to create, and you get the same visualization. And so you can see here, I can tell you that it takes somebody about 20 minutes to learn how to produce a Gantt chart like this in SharePoint, where it might take us about 5 to 10 hours to teach somebody how to build all the features in you just saw on Microsoft Project. So again, you're going to see different tools are appropriate for different level of complexity in your projects. But look at the visibility, how visual this is. Okay, this is what makes project management work. Now, we've really explored our second success factor. Okay, it's a solid plan that is even more solid when you use Microsoft Project or you use SharePoint to really visualize the tasks and the schedules and the responsibilities. But we've got 3 more success factors to go, and time is clicking away. So let's keep moving. I do have one question. Who updates the progress of each task? And Ruth sent that question. I'm happy to answer that. You know, there are a lot of ways to handle it. If you're using SharePoint, the individual who's responsible for it can just open up the SharePoint list, and if they have access, if they've been given security access to that, then they can update it with a % complete or say it's 100% complete. If you're using MS Project, it's typically that's only available to the project manager. But in reality, the question for you is, what do you want to do? Because you can configure MS Project to be project files to actually be visible and accessible through SharePoint. Let me say that again. A Microsoft Project file can be synchronized to SharePoint so that you can make it visible and accessible to everybody on the team. So if you want individuals, team members, to update their own project status, you can set that up using SharePoint and Project together. That's why it's such a powerful combination and why we like it so much. Thanks for that question, Ruth. Now, our third success factor is communication. Communication is probably the most cited success factor over the years, and it's hard to dispute. Here's my communication checklist. How does your project measure up? First, can you make a list of all the people and groups that need ongoing communication? Have you identified what information they need? You know it isn't the same. People that work on the project need different information than people that will be affected by the project. Have you figured out a plan for getting it to them? And have you thought about how much communication is too much? You know, when you're trying to keep your management team, your sponsor informed, they maybe want a different view of the project than the people working on the project. So, can you keep it simple? Here's the test. Can you summarize cost, schedule, and progress data in a simple, concise way? Can you replace pages of narrative with meaningful metrics? This all comes back to, have you really thought through who you're communicating with and what is it that they want to see on their project? You can see that effective project communication is far more than email. Now, here's our jargon alert again. And when you take our project management courses, you learn things like communication planning, RACI matrix, earned value, risk logs, etc. But let me show you something else. Because again, when it comes down to put it into practice, having the right tool in place really makes a big difference. So I want to have everybody out there who's managing projects use a structured, systematic approach. And that's why SharePoint creates such an ideal tool for organizing the information we use on a regular basis. Here's an example of a SharePoint site for a project. You'll notice it says up on the top here, it says Project 1. Okay, and so right under that there's a project summary. You can see who the sponsor is and the name of the project manager, and of course we've just titled our project manager Versatile Project Manager, but you put the person's name there and then describe what the purpose of the project is, so that anybody who comes into this SharePoint site, the website for the project, they'll see the big picture here. Okay, and then what else do I want them to see? Well, let's say for example that I want to see how people run a project status meeting. Now think about this for a minute. Before I'm going to show you this, I want you to think about if you are managing a project. And remember, one of the things we said in our success factors, I have an engaged team that's constantly up to date. How do I do that? And I'm going to tell you that the core secret of that is to have regular status meetings. Project meeting agenda needs to include this information. On a regular basis, you need to review the schedule. Okay, you need to know what's been done, which tasks will be our focus in the near term, and check are our resources ready. Then you also want to do issue and risk tracking. Issues mean what problems do we have, what are the known problems that we have, and what are we doing about them? And then risks are those problems that we don't have yet, but that we might have. In other words, I'm worried about it. I'm worried something's going to happen. That's a risk. Okay? Now, vigilance for scope creep. And this is going to come up more in the next success factor. I want everybody out there running projects to be looking at these factors on a regular basis. And so think about this. Let's use SharePoint to do this. This is our SharePoint project team meeting agenda. And what you'll notice here where the arrows are is those are actually hyperlinks. So every week when I want to sit down with my project team meeting, I pull up this page and I literally go down this. I say we start with project status date, and when I click on that, what I end up opening is the weekly project status report. So as I go through this agenda, I fill this out. What that means is, when do you write your status report? You write it during the meeting, not after the meeting. You write it during the meeting, and so everybody sees what's on there. Okay? What else do we see? If I want to review my project schedule updates, well, you saw that there's a schedule in SharePoint, and now I can pull up specialized lists here. I can pull up a list of recently accomplished tasks, so I can see what's recently happened. I can pull up a list of late tasks and say, look, this task, create new process website or web page, should have been done 4 days ago. That was due 4 days ago, and it was assigned to John and Sue. So it kind of focuses us on that. And so we set this up, and we use the power of SharePoint to stay organized. I go down and I start to look at my issues and my risks. Again, the same thing. I on that web page, that SharePoint page, I click on Issue Review, and up pops my list of issues. And let's pull ourselves into that for just a minute. Okay, let's focus in on that. And you'll notice here, I've got 2 particular issues highlighted. This is for the sponsor. The sponsor's name is Eric Sponsor. That's no wonder Eric is sponsoring these projects. Seems like he was born for that role, right? Okay, hey, remember this, because I'm going to show it to you again in a few minutes. But what I really want to emphasize then is, what have we done here? We've taken SharePoint and used it as a way to be very systematic in the way that we run the project. That is a critical success factor, being consistent, structured, and organized. It's one of the things we like about using SharePoint. Now, let's move on to another project success factor. And to do that, I'm going to start with a question. I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this. You're sitting out there. I've got one question. Before I move on, let me ask this question. Does that work if you were using Project 2010 and SharePoint 2013? Oh boy, I think this refers to the question about syncing project and SharePoint, and off the top of my head I'm going to say yes, and if I'm wrong, then you might want to, tell you what, I'm going to give you my email address, Josh, at the end of the webinar. If you send me that question via email so that I can respond to you, I will make sure that you get an answer from Microsoft Project MVP, and he knows the answer for sure, because that's a great question. Okay, so we're gonna practice our PM skills for a moment here, and here's the question. You're looking at this on the screen. Okay, after a major product development milestone, your customer announces, "This is terrific. Everything is looking good. From now on, we need you to coordinate with our marketing team too. Since the product is on track, you can help marketing to focus on the best features." So, how do you respond? A, absolutely, it would be our pleasure. B, that's outside our current scope. Or C, well, what's more important, product development or marketing? Or D, all of the above. You've all got access to that chat box there. pound in your answer here. It's got to be A or B or C or D. So let's start putting them in, and we'll just see what people come up with. I've got B, I got B, I got D, I got D. Good. I'd like to see here people, you know, with multiple points of view on this. Keep sending them in. I'm not going to give away the clue before I see a few more answers here. So take a risk. Put an answer in there. Thanks, Chris. Okay. Rufus, thanks for weighing in. How about a couple more here? We've got lots of people on the webinar. Thanks, Kate. B. Okay. So we seem to be focused on B and D right now. B and D are our answers that people are sending in. Okay, thanks Ruth, thanks Debbie, thanks Eileen. So I'll tell you what, here's my answer. My answer is D, all of the above. And here's why. But I want, so first of all, think about this. Wouldn't it be nice if someone paused your project every time an opportunity for scope creep appeared? Because that's what happened right here. Now, I think that all of us were tempted to answer A, right? Because who wouldn't want to just say yes to their customer? It's the most natural thing in the world. But that is the source, that intention to please our customer is the source of scope creep. Okay? So this is outside of our original scope, isn't it? And those of you who answered B pointed that out. It is adding work to the project team. However, it is okay, and that's why I like question D. Okay, because question D basically opens up the conversation, and that's what you want to have with your customer. You want to have a conversation and say, you know, I would love to do that. I am so glad that you're happy with what we're doing right now. I would love to be able to help you out that. You know what, though? That's outside the current scope that we're working on. And so what does that mean, right? If it's outside the scope, it means if I take that on, I'm either going to add money, add effort to the project, maybe even I might even have to delay some tasks that I'm working on now, so I hope that wouldn't impact the deadline, right? And so then I've got to come back to them and go, so what's more important for the resources that we have assigned? What's more important, to work on product development or marketing? And that's the conversation you want to have with them. And then you are keeping aware of your scope. So this all goes to our next, our fourth project success factor, which is controlled scope. So thank you for all jumping in on that, y'all. You were either recognizing that this was out of scope or that you had to have that conversation. Okay, but here's the first part of this test for this success factor. So hope again you're focused on your current project. Write down these three words. Okay, write down these three words. Remember that quality is defined as conformance to requirements. So that means the features and the performance. Okay. Now, circle the one that drives the others on your project. Do all of your stakeholders agree with that? Now, there's more to this factor. How does your project measure up? Okay. How do you control scope on a project? Have you identified exit criteria, meaning at the end of the project, what does it mean to be done? How will you know that you are done? Are the requirements and the specifications documented and signed off? Are they formally accepted, right? Have people been identified that have the actual authority to approve changes? Is there even a process for approving changes? Do the goals for the project state what is related but out of scope? If you haven't listed what is out of scope on your project, chances are that at some point you will cross the line. Okay, so these are all tips. These are all challenges for you to make sure you keep the scope controlled. And you've heard that phrase, scope creep. And it creeps. When you're not looking, it changes a little bit, and it changes a little bit. But next thing you know, you're over budget. Okay? So here's the jargon alert. What do you use? You're using a scope baseline, change log, statement of work. And what you'll notice here, again, in the SharePoint system, you could easily, just like we showed you an issues list, you could easily have a change log, right? So that for every proposed change, I actually write down, what is the change? When do I submit it? Who requested it? Did we get this approved or not? Did it, all of that stuff. We can control, we can create a list and use that as a way to create a process for managing our changes, again, in SharePoint. What's important here is this isn't so, it's not really miraculous, but it's well organized and it's all in one place. That was our fourth project success factor. Let's look at number 5. We're doing well on time. Management support. Does your project have management support? Here's the list. Okay, I want you to write down the name of the executive that is actually responsible for the project. Okay, this person champions the team, the project, and the project manager. They run interference for problems. If there's organizational issues, obstacles, they keep their priorities for this project, which really translates to keeping the people on the team steady. You don't find people being pulled off your team to go solve other problems, making your project fall behind. So this person is keeping your priorities and your resources steady, and this person can be relied upon to communicate with top customer management. Do you have that person? Because every project needs that person. Here's another key group of managers you need. Managers who assign people to the project. Remember that project plan that you had, and I asked, do each of those people on the team, are they committed to making that task date and getting that thing done right and done on time? Well, is their boss committed to them getting it done on time? Because if their boss isn't committed to getting it to them done on time, it may not happen. Okay, so the managers who are assigning people to your projects need to understand your schedule and priorities and support them. Management support requires us to keep our management team regularly informed. Okay? As a result, you are getting sufficient resources to meet the goals. Again, these are the checklists. How was your team, how's your team stacking up to this? Are you keeping them regularly informed? Do you have sufficient resources to meet the goals? And do you get timely decisions so everything stays on track? If this is your project, good. But if it's not, make sure you're writing down what you're missing. Now, jargon alert. What's the project management terminology that we do to apply all this? The sponsor. Sponsor is that executive I was talking about a minute ago who's accountable for the project and is running interference for you. You might have a steering committee. Your resource managers are the people who your project team reports to. A PMO really helps sort out a lot of these resource issues and make sure you get management support. So all of these are things that you can learn. There's techniques for it. And I want to once again emphasize how we have leveraged SharePoint to increase management support. Because what you'll see in this page is that we have designed a way to communicate with our sponsor. Communication with management is better when it is structured and frequent. It keeps our conversations focused and concise, which means as a project manager, I'll probably get to have more of those conversations. So this is the sponsors page for our project. Notice that it's focused on the information most important to the sponsor. So again, we've got the most recent status listed at the top. And this is not added. This is not another page that you have to fill out. This is actually pulled from the status report that you've already created. Okay? Now, you've got the list of tasks. But what is it? This task list is actually filtered so that the only tasks that are showing up in this view are the ones that the sponsor has told you they want to keep an eye on. So maybe there's some really important tasks or there's key milestones. Okay? So they're not looking at the whole list. They're just looking at the ones they want to see. And high priority issues and issues assigned to the sponsor. High priority risks, recent risks. So we can construct a concise single point that we can sit down and have our meeting with our sponsor. And I want you to think about this for a minute. Remember earlier I showed you that SharePoint agenda, right, for my team meeting? So I sit down, I have the team meeting using that agenda. By the time I'm done with the meeting, I have updated my status report, I've updated my issues, I've updated my risks, I've updated my schedule right there with the team. I can walk down the hall at that moment and walk into my sponsor's office and say, I'm ready to talk with you now. I've prepared my status report. You don't have to do any more work. This is a way that what I like about SharePoint when I use it this way is it makes me more efficient, I'm structured, and I got to tell you, structured systematic project management tends to be more successful. Now, we've used our 5 common sense project success factors to evaluate your project. Let's step back, see how everyone's doing. I want you to take a moment here and again, reflect on these 5 project success factors. I hope you've been writing them down as you go. And for each one of them, the 5 project success factors, how did it add up? A, alarming. Did you get less than 3 out of 5? In other words, you only got 1 or 2. Was it B, disappointing, because you're still missing 2 factors? Was it C, still at risk, missing at least 1 factor? Was it outstanding because your project demonstrates every success factor? Or fantastic because every project that you manage has all 5 factors? You don't have to tell us. You don't have to share that information. This is for you. You need to know where you are. But I can tell you that if you have less than 3 out of 5 factors, I'm concerned about your project. That's why I say it's alarming. And you know what your problems are now, and you can start to go address them. I can tell you that if you're missing 2 factors, I'm concerned. In fact, even if you're missing 1, it's still at risk because there's not a single one of those 5 success factors that I would want to be without. Okay? So there's only 5. See if you can't get them all there. And if you do, what you know is you have increased the odds of your success dramatically. Now, what you've seen today in these 45-minute presentation is that the 5 project success factors coupled with Microsoft Project and SharePoint 2013 give you a systematic, successful approach to project management. You are able to apply principles, the proven discipline of project management in a systematic way using the right technology. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany and Gary at Quick Start, and they'll tell you a little bit more. Then please stay tuned. We'll have time for your questions. I hope you'll send them in, and I'll tell you a little bit about how to get the 5 success factor checklist if you'd like it.
Okay, this is Gary. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Gary.
Wonderful. Brittany, can you give me control?
Sure. Eric, if you can go ahead and stop sharing. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right. I'll start sharing my desktop here in just a second. Eric, we do thank you very much for that insightful information. Go ahead and click there on that. Stop sharing. All right, so Eric gave us a lot of information in regards to the capabilities of project management. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about is some of the capabilities that Quick Start has project management classes that we offer today. All of these classes that you see right here where it says register now are classes that we are currently running. They're all guaranteed to run. We have some promotions that we're also doing where you can get yourself a Vivo tablet or an iPad or another type of tablet that is available with most of these offerings that we have today. We do have the 2010 versions of Microsoft Project, but also, as you can see, the Project Server as well as Microsoft Project 2013. These classes are offered multiple times, and they've been very successful. Our relationship with Versatile has been very beneficial for both of our companies. Eric's team does a wonderful job. They are great at what they do, and we're very happy to have this relationship. Again, Quick Start has been in business for 25 years now, and we are located up and down the West Coast from San Diego all the way up here to Bellevue, Washington. And unless anybody has any questions for me, I think I'm going to turn it back over and finish up here and see if there's any other questions for Eric.
Thanks, Gary. So if anybody else has any questions for Gary about the classes or Eric about different classes or his presentation, go ahead and ask them now in the chat box, and they will answer them as they see them. Looks like we have a question. Diana just asked if you get the presentation, so you'll get the recording of this webinar once you fill out a survey that we send to you. So just look out for that survey. Maria has a question. Do any of the classes cover projects portfolio management? Eric? Eric, do you want to go ahead and answer that question? Can you hear us, Eric?
Sorry. Okay, so I was muted.
Oh.
I was answering all your questions and giving you all kinds of great advice, but I was muted. So I'm sorry for that. So the answer to your question, Maria, is that Project Server class that Gary described probably has the portfolio management information that you want. Because portfolio management is a pretty specialized topic, you probably should engage with your Quick Start salesperson and explain with them a little bit more in detail what you need there. And if it's not in a standard class, then we are happy to work with you on a custom solution to that, whether it's a custom class or whatever it takes to address project portfolio management in your organization. As you can see on the screen here, if you'd like a copy of the 5 Success Factors checklist, please just send me an email. You've got that down at the bottom. Or you can see that we have a somewhat specialized approach to using SharePoint 2013 for project management. If you'd like to know more about that, how you can use that technique that we're using or how to learn about our approach, go ahead and send me an email about that. If you are a PMP, you can get a PDU for this webinar. We are a registered education provider with PMI. And if you'd like that PDU, send me an email, eric.verju@versatilecompany.com, and you'll get that. I'll respond to that.
Thomas, does that answer your question about the PDU?
Yeah, let's see. Can I get you to the? You know what? You don't need PDUs for your PMP if you're taking your exam next week. Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah. Oh boy. I don't know how that works. We will certainly give you the PDU information. So send me your question, respond to you with the PDU information. But I don't know how to report it. You'll have to ask. You'll have to report it using the PMI methodology, and I don't know if they'll allow you to report a PDU before you got your PMP. I doubt it, frankly. So take the webinar next time. Actually, you know what though? Just here's a tip for you. We do a free monthly webinar at Versatile. Keep an eye on that website, or if you'd like to know about our free monthly webinar, send me an email about that. We'll make sure you get that information. And there's a PDU that you get every month. One free PDU every month if you are watching our webinars, and they're about project management. They're about Microsoft Project, and next year we'll be adding one for about SharePoint for Project 2013 as well. Project management using SharePoint for 2013.
If anybody else has any more questions, go ahead and ask them now. I'll wait another minute or so.
And let me just, while you're thinking about that, let me just chime in here one more time to say that this format here that we're using, I think you want to think about that as a neat example of how to leverage technology to manage projects. And we are always using technology to kind of blending technology, whether it be team meeting technology like this with principles of project management, principles of successful teams. Coming up with that intersection is their best practice. So I want you to think about that intersection picture I showed you a moment ago, about the intersection of success factors and technology. And I think this example here, that using this technology we use today, is a great example of making that happen. So thanks for participating today. It's been a real pleasure to be a part of this. I'll turn it back over to you, Brittany, to close out.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So everybody, thank you for joining. And if you do have any questions about requesting a copy, like Eric did mention, go ahead and email him. Also, you'll receive the recording of this webinar after you fill out the survey, which will be emailed to you by Tuesday. And if anybody has any other questions for Eric, he put his email address up there for you to email him, or you can email me. That's where the surveys will be coming from. And I just want to thank Eric and Gary both for your time, and thanks everyone for joining. That concludes the webinar.